Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome, dear viewers, brothers and sisters, to this ad hoc session we have today related to a certain certain personality who's become quite prominent on the internet, a very articulate individual, and no doubt some very useful content and some very motivational content. The brother's name is Shahid Bolsen. Inshallah, we'll invite him to respond, and he's entirely open to discuss with us directly. So a bit of background about Brother Shahid. He's been Muslim for many, many years. He's been quite active in Muslim issues. He doesn't class himself as an Islamist. He's very much concerned with the affairs of the Ummah, and he makes analysis based off of what he sees as flaws within the Muslims' approach towards revival, or just basically how they're behaving. And he very much advocates Muslims kind of practically sorting their problems out. And I'll let his words speak for themselves. The reason we felt that it's quite important to intervene is because obviously any kind of overture towards changing the Muslims is, as Muslims, we have a reference point. So you may have an analysis, you may have a flawed analysis, but ultimately, as believers, we have to bring things back to our creed. And there are certain statements which, once I've played, you'll probably see where I'm coming from, that they are quite problematic, or at least maybe could have been worded better. And we'll give the brother the benefit of the doubt, inshallah. There's been some context behind the initial video, which I'll be playing shortly, which I internally referred to as obey the rulers, because that's effectively one of the main points, was actually a rebuttal to a very articulate brother as well with Hizb ut-Tahrir in Canada, where he did a very good video around the issue of obedience to the rulers, and he made a parallel how the rulers are not valid. And it's almost, he gave you the analogy within this particular video of, imagine someone building an annex to your house without permission, just completely running roughshod over your own property. That's the same kind of parallel to the rulers, that they have no valid contract. Anyway, I will be shortly playing everything in its entirety so that you can get the full context, and the Sheikh will be commenting. And so we have our resident scholar, and the importance of any matters to do with creed, any matters to do with revival, we have to refer back to the Quran and Sunnah, and we are learning as we go. And, information comes out, evidences come out through scrutiny, through analysis, and it's a learning process. So we have somebody on hand who we've been studying under for some time, and the Professor Muhammad Al Basri, who is I consider to be a scholar on a number of areas I have referred to, whether it's fiqh or usul, and he's published many books on the subjects of usul, everything from matters related to creed, matters related to Shariah, matters related to revival, intricate issues around what happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Anyway, we can elaborate on that in due course. Without further ado, I will play the first clip and invite the Professor, inshallah, to comment. I will also spotlight on the video for the Sheikh, because he's more photogenic than me. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. When I first came across this video, I considered responding to it at that time, but frankly, I hesitated because the topic is just so annoying, to be honest, because it just feels like one of those issues that every generation of Muslims has to just go through over and over again, as if the matter has never been clarified, as if there's been no educational progress. But then, precisely because this is that kind of issue that every generation seems to have to pass through on their way to maturity and knowledge, I thought it might be potentially useful to address it. So I'm just going to play the clip and pause throughout to respond.
Are we required to obey the rulers today as Muslims, considering that the rulers are tyrants, they torture people, kill people, they steal everyone's wealth, they collude with foreign nations against their own people? Most importantly, they rule with other than what Allah has revealed.
Okay, stop. Right off the bat, he's throwing out generalities and accusations as if they are indisputable facts. So this is what you need to do if you're interested in having a serious discussion. Which rulers are we talking about? Which rulers are tyrants? Which rulers are killing and torturing people and stealing everyone's wealth? Which rulers are colluding with foreign nations against their own people? And which are ruling by other than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed? And each one of these allegations has to be substantiated. And I mean substantiated in terms of both proving that the torture and killing and theft and collusion are factually taking place, but also in terms of proving that none of this is justified on the basis of national security or providing for the general welfare of the society. Now, with regards to ruling by other than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, that is a complex discussion. I mean, you have to prove that they are ruling by what is contrary to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, and or that the Sharia does not form the fundamental basis for the laws and policy making of the government. Because the mere existence of unrevealed law, non-wahi based, non-Sharia laws and regulations in their legislation does not constitute ruling by other than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed. It constitutes ruling by what Allah revealed, as well as by rules and regulations and laws that are dictated by situational necessity, that are not stipulated by the Sharia, that are not stipulated by Quran and Sunnah, matters that are Mubah, which is something they are allowed to do, and it is something that every Muslim ruler has always done throughout all of Islamic history. Furthermore, you have to prove that the extent to which they are ruling by other than what Allah revealed constitutes kufr bawah, open kufr, or that certain aspects of the Sharia are not just being compromised for reasons of, again, national security or the general welfare of the population of the people. There may exist some sort of imperative or necessity that requires compromise. And are those aspects that can be compromised? This is a very complex discussion. And frankly, you can't actually talk about whether or not a country is ruling by other than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed unless you're a faqih, because it's not as simple a matter as you might think it is.
I think that's a convenient juncture to stop. You think you have enough for that? I mean, there will be additional discussion on there. He continues about rebellion and things like that. Based off of what you've heard there, what are your initial thoughts, and if you can comment for us?
He says, I don't know what his, is he declare himself, or he's perceived as from a Salafi background or from Hanafi background?
It's not entirely clear, because he is quite stern against Ikhwan as well.
What's about his ethnicity? I saw once a video.
He's American. He's American he's from Boulder. He's a convert to Islam.
So he's not ethnically like from Pakistan or India.
No.
He
He's
looks
immigrated.
like he's Asian or something.
No, he's American.
No, just to understand background, so to understand, because the background will throw light in some of your understanding and make some excuses. So he's a new convert to Islam. So it seems to be he's widely read, but it seems to be he seems to be more sophisticated, much more sophisticated than general Salafi. This I see, you would say more of not like Hamza Yusuf or Hamza Useless, who is like with a Sufi classical fiqh background. That he seems to be much more sophisticated and advanced.
Also, one thing about one point to make about Hamza Yusuf as well. There is a massive nefarious trait behind there. If you just need to look at the person who refers to Abdullah bin Bayah. If you look at the RAND report, he fits exactly that kind of profile. There's a lot more. In fact, there will be videos produced about this.
He studied on the hand of Sufi inclined government scholar, essentially, more or less.
And like for example, one of their guys, Habib Ali Jafri, hand in glove with people like Kadyrov, the one who in Chechnya. Complete every kind of tyrant he's behind. So whereas you got those who are bootlicking America,
just a background, just so we can find excuses or find understanding where someone comes. That's all affects all the theoretical, but that's only theoretical. A human being should be able to withdraw completely from this background and become as neutral as humanly possible. But this is a very tall order and extremely difficult. Maybe only achievable by infallible prophets. Every human being will have some stains from his. Let me give an example for that. A man of the rank of Abu Dhar al Ghafari, who is a very high-ranking Sahabi, and a man of almost certainly we can say the man of paradise, because he embraced Islam very early, and heard about the coming of a prophet in Mecca, Muhammad ﷺ, and he went there and professed Islam publicly, and the Meccan beat him almost to death. And the Messenger of Allah said, told him, go back to your tribe. He's from Ghafar. Ghafar are regarded by the Makkis as a despicable tribe who intercept the Haji and the highway robber and things like that. You will not find any protection in Mecca or any love. and they cannot protect you, obviously. And wait until you hear that I have succeeded, then you join me. And he joined in Medina, obviously, you know. So he's one of the Sabiqeen al-Awwalin al-Muhajirin wal-Ansar, without any doubt. Although he missed Badr, but he's definitely Sabiqeen al-Awwalin al-Muhajirin, and his exoneration and praise and through the wedding with the Prophet ﷺ is not one or two or three, many ahadith. So it's no doubt that he is definitely one of the people of the paradise, without any doubt. Still, this very man still could not get all the stain of Jahiliyyah from himself. One day he got excited and angry. Obviously, he was an impulsive character. That's clear from the story. And said to Bilal being an Abyssinian, being a black, the son of the black. And Bilal complained to Messenger of Allah about that. The Messenger of Allah addressed him, did you regard as negative that his mother is black? You still have stains of Jahiliyyah. So Abu Dhar, to control that stain and disable himself, insisted to lay on the ground, put his head on the ground, which is for the Arabs a major. They cannot accept that, and asked Bilal to put his foot on his head. Say, put your foot on the son of the Arabs, so he can learn discipline and humble himself. So he was managing himself. And one day he saw that the Messenger of Allah is another occasion. He saw the Messenger of Allah appointing many people, etc. in various positions. Say, Messenger of Allah, you did not appoint me anything else. Say, Abu Dhar, anta rajulun da'if. You are a weak man. You don't have the strength. And this appointing people in position of trust requires certain strength which you don't have. Messenger of Allah is honest and open. He will not appoint someone who doesn't have the strength of leadership. This may help us, this hadith later, what is the strength of leadership? It's not a strength in praying and so on, and purity and being early in Islam. That's not enough. There are other characteristics of character. You may be early in Islam, possibly higher in paradise or rank, but not necessarily suitable. And taking such a public position is a very heavy burden. So don't ever accept to manage the money of an orphan, nor to accept to be a leader over two persons or more. So obviously 2 persons or more, because you don't have the qualification to lead people. Impulsive character, no patience. But what's managing the money of orphan? Is Abu Dhar a man who will steal the money? No. But he will be spending the money on charity. That's not the way you manage the money of an orphan. You will manage it the frugal way, holding with iron fist everything except the most obligatory charity. That's what a manager of an orphan money should be. So he never accepted any one of these positions after that, following the instruction of the Messenger of Allah. So that you see, so such a man. So when we say the people may have still stains of their background and so on, that's natural. There's nothing negative there. So the brother is obviously has studied Islam, had accumulated considerable amount of knowledge, but he's falling. The most fundamental fallacy is falling in, and it is when it talks about ruling with what Allah has done. We'll come to if the rulers are like that or not. The current ruler. That's studying the reality and analyzing it. But let's say what's the fundamental philosophical reference. One statement he said, they may be. It doesn't necessarily that what the ruling they have is contradicting Islam. This means that there may be a ruling which does not contradict Islam, but is not derived from Islam. This have the nasty supposition in the background of many people. The majority of Muslims are like that, by the way, is to think that the Sharia is somehow not complete. And you need to fill it by adopting something from another laws, adopting something from Qiyas. Qiyas is actually making another law, adopting something from Istihsan, etc. The problem with that is that where this disease has come, and it infected all madhahib essentially, after Sahaba time essentially, and some Sahaba even has fallen to that, because the majority of Sahaba were not fuqaha anyway. The hallmark of the Sahaba, which makes them the distinguished generation, is that they were sincere and they're willing to struggle for due to their sincerity. They're willing to die for it. That's what makes them. That's when they are sadiqeen. They are honest. They're truthful. No, they are great scholars. No, that's not true. That's not true. Definitely not. There were scholars after them who are superior to them in scholarship, in matter of technical term of scholarship, but not in matter of willingness to die for that what you believe and confront tyrants and confront kafir and munafir in the proper way, according to what Sharia made as an injunction. So the reality is that the Sharia is complete. So how come we that many things we doesn't seem to, we don't have, for example, any hadith or any ayah of Quran which address the issue of that. Can I pick my nose? Doesn't need, because we have the fundamental important usuli point, qaida. It's a qaida. It is a rule. It's not a derivation rule. It is a rule, a general ruling of everything, a general ruling of permissibility. Everything, every entity in the universe, both entities, attributes, actions, even thoughts and ideas, is permissible. You can have any thought. You can have any idea. You can do whatever you want, until the Sharia made an injunction that this specific act is obligatory or desirable. It doesn't need to bring any injunction that is permissible. It's permissible by default. Let's say use the language of default. Permissible by default, or an injunction that's undesirable or haram, or an injunction that it has certain so-called ruling of interrelation. They call it hukum wada'i. It is a cause for something. It's a condition for something. It's a barring condition. It's a condition. It's a necessary condition or a barring condition, etc. So that's if you take that ruling, it's very clear that all human activities, especially the activities of the rules, are essentially but fundamentally permissible. Human activity to start with. So that covers everything. That has not been seen by the people in time past. Clearly, in that they have seen it indirectly in a somehow nebulous way, especially if it relates to items, like say the benefits or the things of the universe, like say the benefits, the items of the universe, the basic ruling is permissible. What's the meaning of the item of the universe? What the sun is a permissible. What's mean the sun? Meaning the sun as an item. Whatever I can do to the sun or benefit from the sun, I'm permitted to do it. Look at the sun, do this, do that, etc. If you say, for example, sheep is halal, meaning I can slaughter it, I can burn it, I can torture it, I do everything basically. Until Sharia says, yeah, you can kill it, it has been killed in certain way. You cannot torture it. You can do this. You cannot do this. You can do this. This is haram. This is kabira. This is this, etc. So based on that, it becomes clear the Sharia is complete. But you need, after being over centuries, Muslim world, since the deviation started with Muawiyah, which we will address later, it became some people inclined and enshrined in their mind to ask. For example, I have been called for many since I arrived in Britain and became a little bit known. Many people call me, say, what is the evidence that this is mubah? We can do. I say, brother or sister, if you want these sisters, I say, your question is wrong. Ask me what is the evidence that is prohibited to do so and so, or desirable to do so. Asking about permissibility is wrong, because the basic ruling of everything, every action is permissibility. So based on that, he had this misconception. Therefore, any law or regulation, we have to look at it. It may contain regulation of the permissible, the mubah, or it may give issues which relate to the declaring something to be usually states in enacted laws and regulations, so on, do not address desirable and undesirable. As they say, you must do that, or you are not allowed to do that, or sometimes expressing clearly you are permitted to do that. By the way, European system tend also to mention what you are permitted to do. In the common law system of Britain and America, especially Britain, there is no need to do any permission. They have essentially general law of permissibility. That's to say, if something is not prohibited or obligatory by a statute or by law meaning here well-established court ruling, which is a precedent, well-established until it's obviously overwritten or some by another or a ruling or a statute, then everything is permissible. So in Britain is the principle really, which is subconsciously in the law system, is that everything, you can't do anything. You don't need, for example, to check at that point. For example, the moment, for example, drones were invented, nobody bothered. Everyone was flying drones. until a statute came say regulating that you could not fly near airports or to these heights or interfering with aeroplanes, etc., which is common sense. The people obviously did not do that, and some mischievous were doing so. They needed a statute to make them punishable. Otherwise, they could not punish them because the judges say there's no law prohibiting that or a previous ruling. You cannot punish them now. You should have done that before enacted the law, something like that. So the common law system of Britain is having this characteristic without being accepted explicitly. The Islamic law is definitely based on that, by necessity of reason and perception and by the eyes of Quran, which I discussed in detail in the book of Tawheed, and I refer to it again. This is the fundamental qaida of Islamic law. So whatever law regulation is either done, but what has happened is this law either derived from Islam or not derived from Islam, derived from revelation. How? The details of derivation has to be shown to the people who are discussing with the ruler, is that according to Islam. It cannot be that he said, for example, I gave you the following example. When people discuss, for example, is an underage person, like I say, 1 under 7 years, to exclude the cases of can he distinguish between good and bad in a limited way, so he has a partial responsibility. But let's say someone who is not mumayyiz, not in distinguishing age, less than 7. Is he criminally responsible? In Islam, we know. The hadith of Allah, we refer to the hadith of Allah, رفع القلم عن 3. The pen has been lifted. There's no sins will be written on the young or صغير, the underage, until he achieves maturity, from the mentally impaired until he gains mental capacity, and the one who is asleep. So if you commit a crime while you're asleep, you're sleepwalking, then you are not responsible until he wakes up. And what happened in your sleep, for example, you swear or something like that, you are not in full capacity of. And also there are other situations which, like for example, a state of extreme anger, which is called ighlaq, then your action are having no validity. If you divorce or you free slaves or you do any action, then you are, because it's essentially what they call in modern law, temporary insanity. If you argue this way, and this is part of the law, that 1 under 7 years cannot be tried or cannot be held legally responsible in a criminal case, then we are applying Islam. But if you apply the same rule that 1 under 7 years, because the French law says that, or the Belgian law, this is kufr, because we referred outside Islam. So what the Shahid did not understand is that you have to have the reference where you get that injunction, where you get that law. That's what makes it Islamic or non-Islamic. If you recognize that fundamental point, then you start seeing clearly where you are going. That's the point. Now, someone say, but many things are regulation of Mubah, ways, means, and procedures, like for traffic signals and so on. They're just regulating Mubah. I could make traffic regulation by regulating that, for example, at red light, people move, at green light, people stop. Or other colors besides red and green. This is very conventional, but it's regulating the Mubah, because at an intersection, you could not see who is crossing, and obviously, if we don't do such a regulation, it's Mubah to go at any time, at any crossing. But obviously, this will definitely in a society, not in every single case, this will lead to accidents and possibly people injured and killed. And the Sharia has clear injunction, clearly making clear that this must be prevented by any means. Any means, ways and means I can develop. Now I can adopt them. They say all the world is adopting that green is to move and red to stop. Why should they have another adoption? No, it does not make sense. Especially since equipment and so on are built this way. It would be stupid to take something else. There's no problem to say, let's take or for example, driving right or driving left. I would rather adopt what the whole world has adopted. But other countries say, oh, we adopt the left driving because that's what the British did in time past and it's well established. And changing it's a bit difficult. Either this or this, because both are permissible. Driving on the right-hand side or left side, both are permissible. I have to adopt one of them so that the traffic can organize and we don't have every few seconds an accident. So ways, means, and procedure we can adopt from others. Because we know before adoption that they are belonging to the domain of permissibility. And we can proceed whatever we want. Take from anyone we like. Learn from anybody we wish. You see the point? So based on that, the question to those rulers and what the rules they have is that currently, especially after Saqeefah and after the First World War, where the whole Muslim world is essentially fell under, there was an exception, maybe formally, publicly. Saudi Arabia, current Saudi Arabia, it was not Saudi Arabia at that time, it was actually Najd. The Hijaz was not belong to that, and Hijaz was still independent in some sense, but the Khilafah Uthmaniyya collapsed, and then these entities emerged. Some of them is semi-natural, and Afghanistan was not occupied as far as you know, and the rest were essentially created by Sykes-Picot and by the imperial powers of the Second World War. And then they started ruling. Some of them even adopted foreign laws before that, and some of them adopted even completed cover law with the, for example, Khilafah Uthmaniyya since 1850, around that, until its fall. It has fallen actually before that. Let's face it. But from 1850 onward, this one mistake has been, they argue that the Shaykh al-Islam gave a fatwa that it's okay as long as that don't contradict Islam. So it seemed to be this brother Shahid is following this fatwa of the Shaykh al-Islam. But the fatwa of Shaykh al-Islam is invalid. It contradicts fundamental principles of Islam because they have adopted certain laws which are not derived from Islam, and some of them contradict Islam.
So is the point that you're making that since that point until now, the default position has been that most of these states ruled by kufr, and it's open kufr in a manner that is not.
We'll get up to that. So that's that, because his premise is that I'm discussing the legal and philosophical premises. Then we now discuss these entities as they exist, what they are. I'm just measuring that as an example. So if we clarify that, then a ruler has to derive his ruling, being it is an abstract law or regulation or an individual case, in this case of judicial ruling, or even an executive case, has to be ultimately based on Quran and Sunnah, in that sense, as I specified, including the choice of Mubahat, and specifically saying this is Mubahat, we have to choose the most suitable Mubah. And there's also a rule of choosing Mubah. It's not arbitrary. It's not arbitrary. Like, for example, you cannot say, it's okay to work at night and sleep at day, and also sleep, or especially in hot summer and so on, and opposite. And then you enact a law like Al-Hakim bi-Amrillah al-Fatimi in Egypt, enacted prohibiting people trading and working at daytime. They should sleep there and work at night. This is tyranny, because this will put the people under duress and force them to spend money for energy and so on for no good reason. All that principle is Mubah. You could choose for yourself. You have a sleep pattern. You could choose for yourself. I work at night. My type of work, or choose such jobs which are required at night, like being a guard or something like that, and sleep at day. That's Mubah. But your choice. But enacting by state, by force, and punishing who is violating is a kufr Mubah, because there is absolutely no justification to make that choice. And he never justified that. That's number one. Secondly, the rulers have to justify. Secondly, he mentions that some of the rules, he admits implicitly that some of the rules contradict Islam, but it may be necessitated by previous conditions, by duress, by things like that. If that's true, let's assume it is true, then it should be known and explained like that. We know this law, we inherited from time the British law, and it is going on in such a way that we cannot change it immediately, but we must change it, and we have to change it in the future. We know that it's not Islamic, but we cannot change it now because of necessity, because of certain conditions, something like that, and this has to be shown to the people, because the people cannot be ruled with something un-Islamic, even under duress, without explaining to them why. They have the right to know that. It seems your brother Shahid is living in another world, although if he's originally American, when the society who is at least in the theory on paper supposed to be free, the end of the free, that point should have been clear for him. It should have been clear. He should have been adopting this point, which is fundamentally Islamic. The people have ruled one, because the ruler is supposed to be applying Islam and managing the public affairs for the benefit of the people, chosen by the people, accounted by the people. That's the Islamic system. Seems to be he thinks that tyranny from Muawiyah onward until now is the Islamic system. No, this is a deformed system, which, strictly speaking, is not Islamic. So this is the fundamental points. I think these are fundamental mistakes points which he starting from.
Can you give us an example of duress? So, for example, there's an individual.
I have no example. He has to give example.
Okay.
There's no.
I'm saying, say for example, the state has been established, and it was
No. I'll give you an example. Yes, the British invade a country like invade a place like Hadramaut, when invaded those local rulers and enforced a set of rules for them. Maybe some set to court. But the ruler stayed in power and applied these because he believed and maybe told the people, or maybe didn't tell the people at that time, is that I have to apply these rules, otherwise the British will come and apply even more worse law, for example. So to protect you, I'm complying with this. For example, at least I'm complying, accepting that they use the ports to attack other Muslim countries, which by itself is an act of kufr. But I have no power. I cannot confront them. That's an example.
I mean, the rulers today, I mean, they're much.
But in that case, the ruler is a Muslim, maybe a good Muslim. He's doing it with good motivation, good reason. But the system is a system of kufr. The domain is not the domain of Islam. It was under the control of the British anyway. In that time. That's one example. Another example, I don't understand the meaning of DRS.
Well, you could, for example, IMF, riba, all this kind of stuff.
No, there's no DRS there. That's no DRS. This is clear. Look at the Saudi Arabia. Before the 50s, before that, I'm not aware of anywhere that there was any usury banking. People trading essentially with basic Islamic interactions. Generally, simple, low level, less complicated, but they were trading this way. And the ruler introduced that deliberately because they were munafiq kafir. And they didn't bother. And they found all kinds of excuses and cover up and so on, and stopping everyone from talking against it, including their own scholars, even until the last days of his life of Ibn Bazz, he was issuing fatwa against that. And the fatwas were issued secretly and distributed as secret leaflets through the country. Imagine the mufti of the country cannot say his fatwa publicly and distribute it. If they had any legal argument, any reason for that, they could have said there's some fatwa of Azhar saying it's actually not these commercial loans, only personal loans are riba. They could have said that. Then we say, okay, get a conference of Muslim scholars and discuss that publicly. But as a matter of fact, they cannot say that simply because one of the main income of the banks since that time, but especially later, is loans to individual persons for consumption loans. And that's actually the banking system is living in the last 20, 30 years on the consumption loans. That's why the banks are still surviving. All other loans are bad. Only the consumption loans. The 30%, 25 to 35% interest on your credit card is that what the banks are living from. That's if you check the banking statement every quarter or every half year or every year, that's where the plus comes. All other things are negative. Commercial loans, etc. That's what will keep them alive. So even that argument wouldn't, even the Azhar statement will not save.
Professor, even today's state, they are explicit about the fact that in their constitution, that they adopted the laws of previous colonial empires from French and from English. So especially in commerce, I mean, I know from the Egyptian constitution, for example, that the commerce, the law of commerce in the Egyptian constitution, I don't know about the one that's changed in 2012, but I know of the time of the Hosni Mubarak, era, that they adopted the laws of the British for the commerce law and trade and stuff like that. For
example, another example is that most of the countries, if they have a constitution which is properly formulated, is that like most constitution or in the Muslim countries say Shariah al-Islamiyya مصدر رئيسي للتشريع. مصدر رئيسي is a main source of tashri', not the only source of tashri'. That's not permissible. It can't be only مصدر رئيسي. It has to be the only source of tashri'. Not only, and even the formulation is bad, but let's be forgiving. It should not be Shariah Islam, it should be the revelation, the Quran and Sunnah. Or Allah is the ultimate sovereign. He is the ultimate reference. What is the technicality of that? Leave that to the detailed soul and the philosophy to discuss. But that must be stressed. The sovereign, the ultimate sovereign, the absolute sovereign is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not the king.
Shall I continue? Because there's a lot more.
Yes, so now we go to the reality. So this is the fundamental. I think this is where his problem starts. He does, I think, for good reason, because this was not is not what usually put on the table. Even Hizb al-Tahrir, the one whom he is rebutting is from Hizb al-Tahrir. Even Hizb al-Tahrir failed to see this point and give it to all sharpness. Especially, he failed that when applying to Khilafah Uthmani in its last 70 years, because the Hizb, for political reasons, and because that's with the obsession with the Khilafah call, declared that the Khilafah fell 1924. If they admitted that Khilafah fell already in time of Abdul Majid al-Thani, Abdul Majid II, around 1850, then the whole thesis will be collapsing, and then he will face the problem that even before 1850 there were other laws adopted from Kufr, and before that the Abbasi had some things which smell for Kufr, and even Bani Umayyah, and then even Muawiyah, then they will be stuck. Then they will say, if Muawiyah ruled by Kufr, then meaning Muslims were not ruled by Islam through history. Muslim life were generally Islamic, and the general issues of private life, of individual commerce as well, but the state structure, even the state structure became non-Islamic. The ruling system was undermined. That's what the Prophet has prophesied. Said the aura, what's the translation of aura? The ties or the knots of Islam will be unknotted, will be broken one after one, starting with ruling, meaning government and so on, governance, ending with Salah. Starting with ruling, ending with Salah. And the first knot which has been unknotted is Muawiyah. So he faced that. They wanted to say, how can we, if we call the people to Khilafah Rashida only, that's the only valid system, then all that history, meaning we did not have a valid system, and the people say you are referring to something which is ancient and not in the memory, and the Hizb thought we have to refer, no, Khilafah Uthmani was Khilafah, was Islamic, it has some shortcomings, it's still Islamic. He tried to, so that the people feel motivated, it's nearby, it's not that far away. Yes, not far away, some application of Islam. And many aspects of good aspects of Islam were applied. Like, for example, no borders, all Muslims were welcome in the domain, all these things. They're nice aspects, many aspects like that. But extremely negative aspects, like tyranny, like rulers killing each other, taking power by force, usurping the right of the Ummah. These are extremely negative aspects. Some of them even border on kufr, etc. So that's the dilemma of Hizb as a political party. He thought, I cannot move the people except by appealing to, we established the Khilafah. It was just yesterday, 1924, just 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's not 1,000 years ago. No problem. He should have taken example of the caller of democracy in Europe who was referring to what? I'm not referring to the Middle Ages, nor to they're referring to the old Athenian and Greek democracy. And they didn't bother that in between it was a bad time. Yes, it was a bad time. We have to admit it. We have to clean that mess. What's the problem? Anyway, I'm not now obviously to criticize Hizb, but that's the motivation. That's the subconscious motivation for Hizb. So that's it. Now, when applied to the current ruler, he's correct. We have to verify it. But I think I don't think he would deny. If I understand this fundamental point, he cannot deny. Let's look what he would say. Which ruler? I don't know which ruler he means now. Which ruler is including? Because what the Shab of Hizb is addressing the existing ruler. He could say, okay, killing the people, doing that and that may not apply in such clear and sharp way to Taliban and maybe Iran, because they declare Islam and it's not clear that they're doing that to that extent. At least Iran, not in their domain, they're doing it in Syria as proxy. Taliban not doing it anywhere. But all other regimes are clearly doing that. Look, for example, Saudi Arabia, imprisoning someone to 35 years for one tweet. A tweet supporting the Palestinians. 35 years, a woman has got a 35 imprisonment. It's absolute tyranny. Maybe he's sympathetic to Pakistan, but Pakistan has also cleared some laws that contradict Pakistan, including usury banking, like in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, the third video, there will be ample ammunition. It's really shocking. The third video, where he starts talking about some pragmatic issues, and he gives a level of husn al-dhan, which, that will be interesting to discuss.
Yeah. So that is gullible political and so on. Any human being can be gullible, because it is unfortunately through Islamic history, scholarship after the time of Sahaba and great Tabi'een who fought against Al-Hajjaj in Jamajim. After that, essentially, with few rebellions here there, like Zayd ibn Ali and like the revolution or the rebellion of Muhammad al-Nafs al-Zakiyya and the Abbasi rebellion, which became successful and turned into a tyranny, etc. Except that the general tendency of scholarship is to submit and be obedient and avoid conflict with the law. Generally, only few dare to confront each other. Very few, very few. You count them in one fingers. That's it. Only few. That's nobody else. So that's it. So he's following that tradition. We cannot blame him, because if you come such a tradition over so many generations, it's very difficult to withdraw yourself from that, because it's as if you are skinning yourself by force and bleeding. That's very painful. So that's, I think, if you look at otherwise, except these two regimes, and these two regimes are not really even completely Islamic. I could argue for them, yeah, because the Taliban, or these are mountain people, they're godfather, they kicked the American butt. Fine. Great. No problem. But in matter of ruling and statecraft, they live 7th century back. They're living in the dark age. They are, as Sheikh Taqi used to describe most scholars of his time, and most scholars of our time still, as Dhalami, dark age scholar or dark age student of Sharia. They're living in the dark age. That's because concerning Taliban. Concerning Iran, Khomeini could not do it otherwise except to get away from the myth of the one in the tunnel or something like that, except by inventing another myth of the Wilayatul Faqih. Wilayatul Faqih means the Faqih has a wilaya. Who is the wilaya Faqih in Quran and Sunnah? Contradicts necessity, non-Islam by necessity. No Faqih has a wilaya. A Faqih is a leader, intellectual leader, but he has no wilaya. He has no guardianship. Wilayatul Faqih, according to Khomeini, essentially, that a Faqih is a guardian on you, like your father guardian on you if you are underage. You cannot even open a bank account without permission. You can do anything without his guidance. No, that's not the case. Faqih has no such wilaya. Faqih has intellectual leadership. If you ask him about fatwa and he gives you a fatwa, he has no way to enforce it on you. Unless he is a judge, then he is enforced by the power of the state, as a judge of the state. Not as because he is a faqih, because he is a judge. A judge is something else. A judge is to settle dispute in a binding way. Otherwise, has no wilaya. And the whole system is based on wilayat al-faqih.
I mean, all these things.
Strictly speaking, wilayat al-faqih is a kufr system. For example, unfortunately, painfully.
I'm conscious that there's a lot more to get through, inshallah.
So but I'll just give the general base, to put the general base. So it's a real problem, really, in the current Muslim rulers and their situation, except maybe two which people could be provoked. Karim Sadiq, rahmatullah alayhi, the founder of the Muslim parliament in Britain, well, he thought that Iran is hopefully the beginning of a new khilafah or something like that, and was arguing, although he's Sunni, by the way, Sunni Hanafi, which shows very a high level of non-sectarian mindset and devotion to Islam for him, rahmatullah alayhi, Karim Sadiq. Definitely that shows his high rank in Islam and his devotion to Islam. But he was at this point was not clear in his mind.
Yeah, I knew him very well. He lived on my road. He's actually he broke off from my uncle's group at Khilafat al-Rashida. So he did have certainly the idea behind the concept of Khilafah. If it's okay with you, I'd like to play the next bit, because this is where he gets onto the issue of rebellion and rulers. And the idea of contract. So this is Madin speaking.
There's some Muslims out there, they say that we are required to obey these rulers and not rebel against them, not even speak out against them in public, based on the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, who orders us to obey the rulers, not rebel against them, and not speak out against them in public, and so on.
Yes, there are many hadiths commanding obedience to the ruler, even if that ruler is a tyrant, even if they are killing and torturing people and stealing their wealth, even if they're colluding, even if they're doing all manner of things that you do not recognize as acceptable Islamically. And even if they're ruling by other than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, as long as that does not constitute open kufr. Now, when I was younger, these hadiths were very hard to swallow. And I totally understand why any young people today would also have a hard time with them. Though the disastrous rebellions in Egypt, in Syria, in Libya, and elsewhere should make it a little bit easier to understand the reasonableness and the wisdom of these hadiths.
So how does this apply today? Well, the whole thing comes down to a pretty simple point, which is contracts. In order to understand this, look at a contract between, for example, a contractor, say he's going to build an extension or fix something. Imagine that a contractor barges into your house and just starts building stuff. And after he finishes building, he says, you owe me a lot of money. You say, I don't owe you anything. He says, but the Prophet ﷺ said you have to pay the worker before his sweat dries. The thing is, there was no valid contract. So he doesn't have any of the rights afforded to a person who has a contract for such work. And the same thing for the ruler and the ruled. The position of the ruler is a position that is contracted. It's an agreement. And it's called the Bayah, which is a pledge of allegiance between the people and the ruler. That the ruler rules with Islam and the people obey him as long as he's ruling with Islam. So if you don't have a valid contract, you have none of the rights that Islam gives the ruler, and the people have none of the responsibilities that they have towards the ruler. And therefore, all these ahadith and all these ayat that talk about the ruler and so on, they only apply to a khalifa that is legitimate according to Islam, according to the conditions of a valid ruler-ruled contract. And therefore, people who say that we have to obey the rulers today, no, we don't.
Okay, so now we get to the crux of his argument, which is that he has found the ultimate loophole for justifying rebellion against the rulers. There's no contract. There's no bay'ah. There's no formalized consent of the governed. Therefore, the rulers are all illegitimate, and they have no claim on the rights that are granted to them in the hadiths about obedience. Again, of course, this is not a new argument. It's an old one. And when I was first new in Islam, I would have thought it was just as brilliant as he seems to think it is. But it's not brilliant. So again, let's try to get specific. He is alleging that the Muslim rulers have no bay'ah, no formal consent of the people to govern. Okay. Which rulers? There are about 190 Muslim majority countries in the world. So which countries are we talking about, and which rulers? The Muslim majority countries that have the largest Muslim populations in the world are Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Egypt, and Turkey. Those are all officially democracies, and mostly functional democracies, with the exception of Egypt and currently Pakistan. But we'll get back to that later. So in these countries, with the largest Muslim populations in the world, they literally elect their rulers by democratic process. And in fact, most Muslim countries, despite what you may think, most Muslim countries have some form of parliamentary democracy, whereby the people elect the parliament, and then the parliament elects or appoints the ruler. Either the head of the party becomes the ruler, or they elect the ruler, or they appoint the ruler, so on and so on. So essentially, you have the MPs giving bay'ah on behalf of the people whom they represent, which is similar to the actual way that the bay'ah was traditionally conducted throughout Islamic history. I mean, historically, the Khalifa was not elected by a popular vote. He was selected by, for example, tribal leaders or other influential members of the Muslim community who would give bay'ah on behalf of the people. This group of people who gave the bay'ah were known as the Ahl al-Aqd, the people who tie and untie, or bind and unbind. And it just means the most powerful, influential, elite members of the society. So yes, you can say that in these countries, in the majority of Muslim countries, the rulers do possess the necessary consent to rule. Now, if you're talking about Muslim countries that have monarchies, like say Morocco or Jordan, where the king does still have considerable power, he doesn't have absolute power. You still have elected legislatures, and the king and the royal family, the monarchies generally, in Jordan and in Morocco, in Brunei, for example, they have the support of tribal leaders, industrialists, powerful business people, and other influential players in society. In other words, they have the support of what could be called the Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd in their countries. In the Gulf countries, like Saudi Arabia, like Qatar, like the UAE, the ruling families absolutely have the support of the largest families and tribes in their territories, and they do literally receive bay'ah from them. Now, what he's talking about, this sort of stereotype of the, imposed dictator ruler in a Muslim country, that maybe only accurately applies to countries that were Muslim majority countries that were formerly part of the Soviet Union, like say Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and so on, where there is pretty purely autocratic rule. However, you can be certain that even in these countries, those rulers have the endorsement of the most powerful, influential corporate, business, military, and intelligence components of the society. The most influential and powerful players in their countries support the ruler, which brings us back to Egypt and Pakistan, where democratically elected rulers were overthrown. Mohammed Morsi in Egypt, and more recently in Pakistan, Imran Khan. Arguably, in both Egypt and Pakistan, the Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd is the military. And they appointed who they appointed. Now, none of these methods for installing a ruler are unheard of in the history of the Khilafah, and none of these methods invalidates the Bayah requirement, because Bayah does not necessitate popular democratic elections, but only the approval or the endorsement of the most prominent elite segments of the community. I think it's fair to say that you would be hard-pressed to find a Muslim ruler in any Muslim country who does not enjoy the support of the elites in his country, whether those are tribal leaders, industrialists, business leaders, or the army. It's kind of an awkward conundrum for these Khilafahist type people, in that they insist that Khilafah is the only valid form of government and that democracy is kufr. But then they usually find themselves arguing for Khilafah on the basis of democratic legitimacy. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was not elected by popular vote. He was selected by committee. And there were various methods for appointing a Khalifa and establishing his legitimacy ever since. And none of these methods was by popular mandate. Now, I have nothing against popular mandate, but you cannot honestly claim that popular mandate, popular vote, election, what have you, is the prerequisite for establishing the contractual legitimacy of a government, of a ruler, and that only by popular mandate is that ruler then covered by the rights that are granted to him in the hadiths by Rasulullah ﷺ about obedience. The truth of the matter is that we had rulers who were appointed by the elites of society for over 1,000 years, and that is what we still have in many places, alongside a couple dozen countries where they have democratically elected rulers. So yes, those hadiths apply today, whether we like it or not. Now, if the elites, if the Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd of our societies who are appointing the rulers, if those people are corrupt, that's a separate issue. And perhaps it would be more useful for you to try to address that issue rather than rebelling against the rulers. Jazakumullahu khairan wa assalamu alaikum.
Okay, that's the end of that video. I'm sure there's plenty to comment on there.
No, actually, he succeeded putting Hizb Tahrir in a corner, and other people like that, because the problem is that the Shab of the Hizb is arguing the wrong way in matter of the rebellion, and two fundamental errors by him, and first of all, he's arguing about the issue of Bayah, etc. And this is the problem of Hizb, because Hizb does not accept Bayah, but does not accept election and democracy, and declare democracy to be kufr, without distinguishing between democracy as a philosophy, as referring to the people as the ultimate sovereign, or as procedures and way of governance. So that's the sole point of Hizb Tahrir, but also jihadi. That's where they have broke their own legs. That's number one. So he caught him in this one. Secondly, he caught him because he's talking about the hadith, etc., and the obedience to the ruler, even if do that, unless kufr buah, the one of Hizb Tahrir, and also brother Shahid, they both accept that as given and as fundamental. And then the one of Hizb Tahrir was forced to go back to the Bay'ah. This applies only for one who has a legitimate Bay'ah or legitimate election. Okay, let's address two issues. The issue of Bay'ah, we'll leave that, because I don't think it's a disagreement between both. What is the type of the Bay'ah, and all these definition of Al-Hal wal-Aqd is a fine point of what is called Sultan Al Ummah, the authority of the Ummah. I'll leave that at the side. It's a bit complex, and we'll clarify that, inshallah. But the first one, all these hadith, which I say many hadith, they're not real many hadith. Although we have the hadith considered the rulers, the Sahih hadith. We have the hadith of Salama from Hassan Al Basri. Most likely this is 140. Is all channels are على Hassan Al Basri عن ضب العنزي عن Salama. And Hassan Al Basri is مدلس. عن cannot be accepted from, especially if the matter there's a question mark on it. And besides the مدلس, Hassan Al Basri is also someone who is sometimes interjecting a hadith, because usually he's not sitting like a formal later generation who sit and read from the book and the students write down the hadith. He's a man of politics, a man of wa'ad, a man of public affairs. So he mentions statement of Rasul, then he interjects his comment, then go back to hadith and interject the comments. And that's clear in that hadith itself. But independent of that, there's no reliability on that isnad. Although it's a Muslim, but it's a mistake. The same apply for two of his major interesting hadith, which the one about no people will succeed allegedly from Abu Bakra, and from Sayyidina Allah, no people will succeed if they appoint a woman as their leader. That's a hadith is fabricated. It's a fabrication of some sons of Abu Bakra, and it's also mudallas. An Abi Bakra is not I hear the Bakra.
Just to clarify, before you, so obviously not everyone knows what Mudallis is.
This hadith in Bukhari, yeah.
Mudallis is when you drop a chain because
no, Mudallis with an, and reality is an meaning just is reaching from this one. There may be someone in between.
Skip someone who may be contentious. That's the idea.
Skip someone contentious, not contentious. Mudallis is the one who an is not necessarily in the meaning that حدثنا. The normal meaning of an حدثنا. I got that from you, meaning you told me that. So that's in the language of muhaddithin, the time Sahaba and Tabi'in and so on. That's the standard. But some people use an. They don't say حدثنا, because if you say حدثنا and he did not tell you or a heed from, then you are lying. But he drops that either deliberately, that will be tadlees amd, which is very negative and very, very bad, or not amd, just it's reaching from Abu Bakr, because your memory is not that good, etc. I give an example. I don't think it's a matter of hadith, but just for those who will be shocked to know that this hadith is fabricated. Another hadith, again, Hassan Al Abi Bakra, again the same, fabricated by the sons of Abi Bakra who were criminals. But it's a long study. We have that, we're completing it inshallah soon. Is that the Messenger Allah saying about Al-Hassan, Messenger Allah saying about Al-Hassan ibn Ali, that my son is a Sayyid, is a master. Allah will bring him two groups of Muslims together. That's fabricated to exonerate Muawiyah, but it's not. The Messenger Allah never said that. Anyway, so that's one. Second, another hadith is come with Shami isnad in 2 words. One word is that they will be rulers when you see things which you don't like. Which you don't like. If you see something you don't like, then don't pull your hand from ta'ah. Another version, 2 versions. Some ruler would be some of the same way they don't like from the disobedience to Allah. If you see that, don't pull your hand from ta'ah. So we have two words, but they're fundamentally different. So there's a problem with this hadith. There's the matan you cannot rely. Most matan mentioned in the books of the hadith is the one people who you see something which you don't dislike from obedience to Allah. Someone will say, how can I dislike something from a ruler which is not disobedience to Allah? Yeah, very well. Maybe the ruler is very tough. He levies heavy taxes, saying these taxes are needed for national defense and so on. With the approval of Shura, you don't like him. You hate that from him, but that's not a justification. But maybe he is very strict in treatment of people. Maybe he's not merciful like a previous ruler who was gentle and merciful. Maybe he's not granting so much benefit and things like that. But it's all mubah. That's not obedience to Allah. So you see that hadith is questionable. The only hadith which passes that, and the only one in Bukhari, by the way, the hadith of Kufr Bu'ah. That's number one. Second, the hadith, they obey even if they are tyrant, if they're killing and so on. That's not true. That's now the mistake. Most of these hadith are narrated in a cut, partly cut form. Most hadith are mentioned, like for example, hadith Ka'b ibn Ujra. May Allah protect you from rules which come after me, who do this and this and this, who do whatever they are not ordered to do, and say what they are not telling the truth. And the hadith goes, whoever approves their doing or declare that their lies are true has nothing to do with me Yawm al-Qiyamah. I have broken the relation with him. And if that happens, then whoever fights them with his hand is a believer. Who fights him with his tongue is a believer. Who will fight who struggle against is not fight. Jahid. من جاهدهم بيده فهو مؤمن. ومن جاهدهم بلسانه فهو مؤمن. ومن جاهدهم بقلبه فهو مؤمن. Whoever object to that by his hand, which usually means rebellion, or with the tongue, or with his heart, those are believers. Anyone who does not do that, he has nothing to do with Iman. He's out of the fold of Islam. And many hadith of Munkar are originating from this type of hadith, and these are the ones who are mutawatir. There's no hadith said that if they kill and maim and so on, you obey them. And then we hadith, the famous hadith about, which is in most books you will find only the front part narrated. When the Messenger of Allah visited a group of people from Quraysh in a place or in a house, they're all Qurayshi. He took the two sides of the door and said, is anyone, all of you from Quraysh, is anyone not from Quraysh between you? Obviously, he did that on order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not just haphazard. He was not drunk. He's the messenger of Allah. Infallible. They said, yes, except one present is the son of our sister from another tribe, and one is a freed slave, Mawla. Say, Mawla al-Qawm minhum, a Mawla of Quraysh is Qurashi, and the son of your sister, even if his father is also Quraysh. That's the first rule. That's concerning genealogy. Leave that aside. And they said, Isma, listen, Al-Imam Quraysh, the Imams will be from Quraysh, the Imams after me will be from Quraysh. What's their characteristic and what's your duty to them? ما إذا حكموا عدلوا. If they rule with justice. وإذا وعدوا وفوا. If they promise, they fulfill their promise. وإذا استرحموا رحموا. If they are asked for mercy, only if they ask for mercy, they give mercy. Obviously, it's better if you give mercy without being asked. That's clear. But that's the minimum. They have the rights on you, like my right on you in that case. فمن لم يفعل ذلك منهم, whoever does not comply with these three, فعليه لعنة الله والملائكة والناس أجمعين. Allah's curse. And the curse of the angels and the curse of all people on him. That's you find everywhere. This hadith. By Tawatur from Anas ibn Malik, narrated many people going to Anas ibn Malik. But you don't find, except in rare places, that you have to search for it, and we have a research, I think it's is it translated? It's not translated. Is it translated? Rush?
Which one?
The hadith, what I'm just telling that.
No, because there's stuff in Haakimiyyah. There's quite a bit in the Haakimiyyah.
No. This hadith physically is a complete research about it with the appendix.
What's the name of the title? I'll be able to check.
Yeah, okay. It's in Arabic anyway, available.
Okay.
So that's where most narrators, including Musnad Ahmad al-Fawstat and many hadith scholars, right? They stop after in that point and they continue. They were afraid because some of them were almost killed because they narrated the whole hadith. What's that saying? فَإِن لَمْ يَفْعَلُوا, the curse of Allah and the angels is on them. That's no doubt. That's for akhirah to be settled. That's clear. فَإِن لَمْ يَفْعَلُوا, if they don't rule with justice and fulfill their promise and give mercy if they are asked for mercy, فَضَعُوا سُيُوفَكُمْ عَلَى عَوَاتِقِكُمْ وَأَبِيدُوا خَضْرَأَهُم. Exterminate them by the sword. Put your sword on your shoulder. That's usually in the battle. You put your sword like that and go in the battle. That's the meaning of it. Exterminate them. What happens if you don't do that? فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا فَكُونُوا حَرَّاثِينَ أَشْقِيَاءَ تَأْكُلُونَ مِنْ كَدِّ. And then you will be miserable serfs under feudal. At the time, the farmer are usually serfs under feudal laws, almost like slaves. Even if they are not formally slaves, they are essentially slaves. Then be حَرَّاثِينَ أَشْقِيَاء, miserable serfs, eating just from their handiwork. That's all. Living just to eat from mouth to air. That's it. Then be happy with this life. That's the life you will suffer. To be serfs. Then be happy with being serfs. Don't expect Allah to help you with anything else. That's it. And that later part was someone told Al-Mahdi al-Abbasi, and this Mahdi is not Mahdi. His name is Mahdi, but he is misguided. He's not a guided one. Because the translation of Mahdi is the guided one. He's not a guided one. One of his cronies told him, Sharik al-Qadi is narrating this hadith. So he ordered him to be brought before him. Said, did you narrate this hadith? Sharik al-Qadi, no, I never narrated this hadith. And the man said to that, how will you lie against Qadi Sharik? And the man said, علي الطلاق, I'm obliged to divorce my wife and do this and do Hajj walking without sandals and so on. If I'm lying, he told me the hadith, and he turned to Sharik, said, you see what he said? He said, علي ما عليه. I didn't say it. علي ما عليه. On me is on what is on him. And then he says, you see, he made an oath. You must be lying. I say, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Khalifa, this man is the most intelligent Arab. And he said, alayya ma alayh, he means he has clothes the same way that I have clothes. Tell him to make an explicit oath like my oath. Now, Khalifa al-Mahdi, the unguided Mahdi, turned to Sharik, say, make an oath exactly like he did, that your wives are divorced, that you will go to Mecca walking without sandals. And then Sharik was stuck now. Said, yes, I narrated. Said, wait. From whom did you hear this hadith? Who narrated? Say, Al-A'mash. Say, Wayli ala sharib al-khamr. Wow, if I knew where is his grave, I will dig him out of the grave and burn him. And the story continues. It's in that research. So that's one hadith. And this with this method is narrated through A'mash, etc., Salim ibn Abi Ja'ad, from Thawban, from Messenger of Allah. But it's not only from Thawban. It comes also from Hani bint Abi Talib. It comes also from Nu'man ibn Bashir. And it comes also from another Sahabi, I will remember, Anas ibn Malik. Or each one of them with good isnad. The one of Salim al-Ja'ad is excellent isnad. So the claim that we are ordered to obey if this or so on is nonsense. So that's the first premise. This premise is faulty. We are not obliged to obey. And actually encouraged for rebellion, which shows the point of view, this man's point of view, and the point of view classical scholar, and outside the Islamic law, the point of view of Hobbes, I think the Hobbian point of view in the British history of law and so on, is the wrong one. Why is it the wrong one? Because the instruction of Messenger of Allah did not come from himself. It's not a philosophy of state or society. It's not a philosophy of epistemology. It's not a philosophy of divine freedom and destiny no. He was a simple man. At best, what he mastered before he received revelation was a shepherd and a bit of commerce for his wife. That's all what he mastered. Otherwise, he has nothing, and he was illiterate. So it has come from Allah's seven heavens. And this is the correct cure. What comes from Allah's seven heavens is the truth, not what people think is the truth. Not that what people think is the truth. That's not what people think. So that's it. And there's many other ahadith. Hadith Ka'b ibn Ujra, all of them encourage people to make jihad against it with the hand. If they cannot do that, then with the tongue. If you cannot do that, then at least with the heart. Reject them with the heart. Hate them. Wear them. Educate your children and next generation to get rid of them. So this is the first fundamental premises, which the one of Hizb al-Tahrir fell under. What they relied on some fabricated ahadith, some questionable hadith, and left the other ones which have been unfortunately scattered in the books and never brought in one place, because bringing them in one place will make the facts become so clear and apparent that you are in a state of shock. But if you scatter them in the books, you don't see them. What you find in the books, even the books of Aqidah, is only the hadith al-Bukhari, Faqih of Mubah, and one or two hadith. And that's what Brother Shahid said. So you can't blame him that this Tadlees, this cover-up, this playing game, this cheating and hiding what the Messenger of Allah said is committed by Ahmad ibn Hanbal and previous scholars. Yes, unfortunately, we have to face this bitter reality. So that's the first one. Secondly, the issue of al-hal al-aqd, that's the second one. Hizb al-Tahrir is wrong in saying democracy is covered. This Al-Jannah, what is the meaning of democracy? Democracy means democracy, ruling of the people. The word ruling has various meanings. In Quran, if you summarize the meaning of ruling, it could be meaning the fundamental enactment of principles of law and declaring what is permissible and not permissible, what pleases Allah does not please. This ruling is exclusive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another way of ruling is formulating laws and enactment. That's very well can be done by others. The Messenger of Allah formulates rulings. But based on what he received from revelation. Scholars formulate rulings and put books of fiqh. But based on what? What they think is the revelation, according to the best ijtihad. If they are mujtahid, or they are cheating, they are munafiq and kafir. It can't be that and that. You would never say that the one who writes a book of fiqh is really a true believer and really refer to Allah and His Messenger. Maybe he's doing, maybe he's not. But he's covering up. Could be. We don't know. Because he's not infallible. The same apply for governments and parliaments. They enact a law. Did use from Allah and Messenger discussed it with this intention? Maybe not. So ruling could be, but then we have the judicial rulings. Judges do ruling. So the word ruling is very confusing in democracy. It may be, but the Greek meant that's the ruling of the people as the ultimate sovereign. Then this is kufr. There's no ultimate sovereign. There's only one ultimate sovereign, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It cannot be the people. It cannot be the king. It cannot be anybody in the universe. If they mean something else, if they manage the affairs and they refer to the gods or something else, that's something else. So this is, and that's what makes it a little bit troublesome to use the word democracy. But I would say, obviously, Hizb is very sensitive to that because it believes all democracy is kufr. That's a mistake. And also some jihadi. I would say we use the word democracy as a substitute or similar to to the statement or the principle of Sultan Al Ummah, the authority of the Ummah. That the Ummah is having the authority, every one of them, not Al Hal Aqd or anything like that. That's obviously has to be deduced from Quran and Sunnah for many evidences. There's no one single state area. We can say there is some statement which shows that ultimately the authority is the Ummah. For example, let me give an example. Although it refers to what happened to Bani Israel after they left Egypt, but it is obviously this Ummah is having better even standing in matter of authority of their authority than the Bani Israel. When Moses tells the people, remember the favor of Allah upon you, جعلكم ملوك جعلكم ملوكا وجعل فيكم أنبياء. Remember the favor of Allah on you who made you kings, make you kings, muluk. You own your own destiny. You are master of your own self. You own yourself. Obviously, Musa does not mean that the ultimate sovereign. It's clear he cannot be. And made between you also prophets. So Bani Israel became, after they left Egypt, everyone became his own king. جعلكم ملوكا. Everyone. He's addressing everyone. He made you kings. He made you kings. And they were managing by the prophets and by the tribal chieftains, but everyone has authority. And they were doing it by consultation. Although the prophets were managing, running the affairs according to Hadith. كانت بني إسرائيل تسوسهم الأنبياء وستكون خلفاء فتكثر. And then he said, "Fu bay'at al-awwal fil-awwal." If the hadith is authentic, I think it's authentic, and nobody is arguing about that. It's very clear, and the hadith is very clear. The people of Israel, the people say, were managing by the prophets. So we will say, how come? Dawood and Sulaiman and Talut, yes, starting with Talut, with Saul, they chose monarchy. The Quran mentioned that story in Surah Al Baqarah, that they asked to appoint a king, and the prophet allegedly that they want to perform jihad. To perform jihad, they need a king, allegedly. The Quran mentioned the story only abridged and rebuked them that they did not do the jihad as they claimed, and did not go in the details of the story. But you go to the first book of Samuel to see what was the full story. It's a shameful story. It's a real shame. The people have decided to give up on freedom and independence and single personality, and became slave to a king. And the prophet warned them that they would be enslaved by the king. They would be oppressed by the king, and they still insisted. And Allah granted them. Allah is a sovereign. He can grant it. He can make it permissible.
So the crux of this argument about Bayah and
so the argument about Bayah is ineffective here. Definitely, all these obedience and so on is obliged only to one who has a valid Bayah. How is the Bayah is valid? It's a very complex, because clearly there's no way everyone will be able to give Bayah personally. There will be a representative given or a majority given directly. We have had in Islamic history majority given Bayah directly, one by one. We have that. And also what he mentioned, Abu Bakr by committee is not true. Abu Bakr was not by committee. Abu Bakr was discussing with the people of Saqeefah, and then this was not a valid Bay'ah making him only in the masjid when everyone came. Everyone came in Medina, was about a Muslim outside. And Medina was at the siege by Murtaddin and so on at that time. There was no way to communicate at that time with us. So the people in Medina were sufficient representation in behalf of it, but everyone gave Bay'ah. Everyone. There was no community or military. In the case of Umar, yes, Abu Bakr did the process of like a choice committee, and they suggested that Umar should be given bay'ah after him, and everyone gave bay'ah, including Ali for Umar. In time of Uthman, some mistakes have happened, but Abdurrahman ibn Auf said, "I am not interested in it. I will do the job which Abu Bakr did," and he checked with everyone in Medina, men and women, but they didn't check outside. At the time, it was not feasible. But at the time, also there was a good reason. Would have been a good reason if they decided to restrict on, if they said liberty, after they restricted themselves to the bay'ah in Medina out of necessity, because it's impossible to communicate to any reasonable time and get the votes from elsewhere. At that time, it would have been permissible to do that, Uthman and Ali also, but Ali insisted to ask everywhere in the world to send him the bay'ah in writing, and camel laws of bay'ah came from everywhere except from Sham when Muawiyah started his rebellion and broke the back of the Ummah after that. So it's not a military and not a tribal chieftains. That's not true. Now, why Medina, even if they have restricted, will have a certain reason? The certain reason is that Medina is the place where Muhajirin and Ansar, the Sabiqeen al-Awwaleen, essentially are living, except few who are in the battle campaign outside. And the Muhajirin Ansar are exonerated by the Quran and given special standing. But there's only one generation. For that generation, when we discussed the ayah in tafsir, in last halqa of tafsir, والسابقون الأول المهاجرين والأنصار رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه والذين تبعوا بإحسان رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه. So this specific group of people, maybe 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, Allah declared that He pleased with them, hinting that these are the cream la cream of the Ummah. This is the cream la cream of the Ummah. In that generation, until they are all gone, you can say, if they give bay'ah, that binds everyone. It's not conceivable that anybody else will dare argue with them or not regard them as, but this is an ummah or a nation in creation, in emergence. After they have all passed away, the ummah is well established, and there is no difference between a scholar and the street sweeper. No, none, no difference. All of them are part of the authority. Even before that, for example, we have many stories about, for example, at the time of Prophet Salam, Zainab, his daughter, gave protection to her husband, ex-husband. Well, he was not cohabiting with her, but he was taken, he ran away from a battlefield and took refuge at Zainab. And then they were searching for him around everywhere because they knew he was there in a caravan or something like that. And then Zainab lifted the veil and because she lives near the masjid, and the Messenger was sitting with the people around him, and she said, "Listen, you don't need to search for Fulan al-Fulani. I don't know his name. You don't need to search for him. He's with me. I gave him protection." And the Messenger said, "Do you see what this woman is saying? My daughter is saying, Wallahi, by Allah, I have no idea that has happened." That's number one. So he's not with his contestation, we're not with his knowledge. That's number one. Secondly, but we have to accept her giving protection and granting him asylum, even a single word, because the Muslims are one ummah. Even the lowest of them can grant asylum, and it's binding on everyone else. That's in time of the Messenger of Allah.
Yes, Professor, and even the slave who gave the peace
in time of Umar. Yeah.
Exactly. But I want to say here something very short.
That's tell the story. The story is that slave put there was a people in a fortification. They were very difficult to end the siege with them. So he came to the idea, let me suggest to him a certain settlement which end that siege. And he put it in an arrow and sent it to them. So they find that suggestion was very reasonable and wise. So they can also accept your suggestion. Say, what suggestion? Say, this one. They say, we did not send that. Say, it's from you. It came in an arrow. And they turn out the man who sent it, yes, I sent that. They say, this is sent by a slave. Say, we don't know who is a slave from you. You are a battle campaign. We cannot distinguish who is a slave and who is free. Make your mind. You accept that, or you go back in the fortification and continue fighting. Say, okay, we don't do anything until you ask Umar. So said to Umar, this happened, and the slave, one slave, a bondsman, did that. So Umar wrote to them, a slave of the Muslimin is one of the Muslimin, and his dhimma, his covenant, is the covenant of the Muslimin. His suggestion, accepted by the side, is binding. So Brother Shahid did not know these things. Unfortunately, that's you don't find usually in the books of fiqh in the Bab al-Imamah. You find it somewhere in the books about akhlaq, about nice manners, things like that.
Also, the premise
about spirituality and things. You don't find it where it belongs.
One of the very flawed premise that we have to effectively immunize ourselves from is this idea of somehow acts that happened before is somehow some kind of an Islamic legal precedent. Allah and His Messenger are reference point. Going back to this historical event, if we start referring, I mean, because the thing is that it's one way of saying we had numerous oppressive regimes, etc., and then to say that as a standard and therefore to form justification, it should be balanced.
Now that's the point. If that's clear now, that these hadith are mostly fabricated, which they invoke, even the Prophet and most scholars are. They're questionable. Because if you go to the Quran, there's no mention of Ul Il Amr in 2 places of it. أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا رسول أولي الأمر منكم. So Ul Il Amr are adjoined to the Prophet as a footnote, not an independent. There's no say. They say obey Allah and obey His Messenger. with a separate obey and obey, because the obedience to messenger is equal to obedience to Allah by necessity with the Quran and necessity of reason. And then they didn't say obey the one in charge, he said, and or the one in charge, attached to the Prophet. And then after that said, فَإِنْ تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ. If you dispute with them or dispute in anything, including dispute with the rulers, they refer to Allah and His Messenger. There must be some judicial system to settle these disputes. And if he does not accept a judicial, like a constitutional court, which gives a final judgment, if he doesn't accept, then he's rebelling, and this is kufr bah, and then you fight him. But it's the details of rebellion we discuss elsewhere, the fine details. That's the fundamental point. Another place shows where Ul Il Amr are prominently referred to and must be referred to is that when Allah rebukes the munafiqeen who are spreading rumors and gossip. They hear about, for example, there's news that maybe an army is coming, or some things happening far away, which we don't know exactly what's going. Maybe someone came from a trip or a business trip from Sham and saw that, for example, the Ghassani king is preparing an army. Maybe he's preparing an army to fight the Persian. We don't know. How do you know that? That's coming to mind. He comes to say, the Ghassani are preparing an army and they're about to attack, or hear something, some rumors, and attack Medina. Maybe he's right, maybe it's true, but what he does, he comes to the masjid and say it publicly. And Allah rebukes that himself. وإذا جاءهم أمر من الأمن أو الخوف أذاعوا به. If they receive some news about which is related to security and to fear, etc., they say it publicly and make to terrify the people. ولو ردوه إلى رسول الأمر منهم العالم الذين يستنبطونه. If they had referred it back to the messenger and those who are in charge of them, they would have known how to deal with the matter properly before terrifying the people and making them on edge. That's only that application. That's the way you should deal with issues of security. You don't say go in publicly or put it in social media in modern time. You report to the authority, the legitimate authority, the messenger or Ul Amr minhum. You have to have authority of this rank of legitimacy, not to the British authority, or the American authority. No respect, no disrespect to anybody.
But
okay, so just to recap, so we're talking about Bayah.
So that's what all the Quran or the Ul Il Amr says. The rest is referred to Sunnah, and the Sunnah is very clear. If you take all evidences and not be fooled by some questionable fabricated hadith, or at least some wording which have been twisted out of their place in some hadith, which may be still partly authentic, but not fully authentic in that wording.
Am I okay to start the next video now? Because I will brace yourself. It does have some even more questions.
So I don't really blame Brother Shahid for that, because this is really the overwhelming common point of view, and which is being hammered through history in the head of the people.
And more importantly now as well, the amount of machinations around the issue of ruling and in terms of obedience to the ruler. As good was it? Was it Goebbels who said that if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes a fact? That's become cemented in people's minds, which is why it needs to be broken. For example, Haakimiyyah, even though the book itself is 20 years old, it goes through every single isnad on the issue of ruling and somebody, rebellion, the whole issue of the whole issue of someone rules by kufr. So, for example, rule by kufr or someone become kafir, it's all in there, and that's 20 years old. So it's a compelling argument, and inshallah, we invite people to read the material, and it's Hizb ut-Tahrir, for example, adopt it. It'll provide you with significant ammunition to destroy this idea.
But I say the Prophet shot himself in the face, in the foot. It did not go to the issue of obedience for the fundamental philosophical point. It is a fundamental principle of Islam is that what's in ayatul لا إكراه في الدين. لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي. فمن يكفر بالطاغوت whoever reject طاغوت يكفر reject طاغوت. الكفر here means rejected. ويؤمن بالله. طاغوت is the narrow meaning in anyone who attribute to himself sovereignty. That's a طاغوت. You have not only to say he's a طاغوت and he doesn't have a sovereignty. That's a statement of fact. Note of that. You have to reject him. And if necessary, fight him. يؤمن بالله. Meaning, يؤمن بالله as the ultimate sovereign, the only Rabb, the only Lord. So, based on that, it is prohibited to have obedience to anybody except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unless you get an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala otherwise. So obedience to anybody except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the sovereignty is to Allah. What's the meaning of sovereignty? It has two sides. Sovereignty meaning the one whose ultimate right of enacting laws and defining this is good, this is evil. And this is good, do it. You must do it. It's desirable to do it. And this evil, avoid it, or you must avoid it at the fairest time. Yeah? That's the meaning of ultimate sovereignty. So from a human side, you look at sovereignty as like a coin. One side is Haakimiyyah. The other side is obedience. So if all this is done, he's the only one deserving obedience. So how come that there's anyone deserve any obedience anywhere? Nobody deserves obedience. Nobody. Unless there is an evidence, and this must be an unrefutable, absolutely established evidence. Now, when we establish, if you have established the Quran is from Allah with certitude, the Quran says clearly, ما يطع رسول لك يطع الله. ما أرسل من رسول إلا يطاع بإذن الله. Then the obedience to the messengers is obligatory on us by divine permission and injunction. بإذن الله, with Allah permission. Not because they are messenger, not because they have beautiful eyes and nice beard. No, by Allah permission. Obedience to the parents, nowhere in the Quran, by the way. We are ordered to be charitable to the parents, but not to obey them, by the way. This is one of the trickery of the classical scholarship. No, you are not obliged to obey the parents. You are obliged to be charitable to them. So if your father tell you, divorce your wife, tell them, thank you, Dad. That's not your business. I have to decide that. But if you want me to go shopping for you or come clean your toilet, I'll do.
Professor, just before moving in, I just want to...
I just mentioned that one said. So there is no deserve obedience. So if you say the rule of the obedience, if he kills, bring me the evidence, chase that clearly. Nowhere it said, even the fabricated hadith, even if he kills and so on. That's what scholars claim. Some scholars, both either what you call it, people who are simple-minded, idiotic, or treasonous scholars say. Or these fabricated hadith, which have to be exposed and be fabricated.
Yes, Professor, I just want to highlight something. There's a contradiction in the brother's talk when he said that the Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd are representatives of the Ummah, and the Ummah is not obligated to give...
That's clear. No, I didn't discuss that because very obvious.
Yes.
Just tell him, look at the American system. The only Ahl al-Aqd is the parliament which is elected, ultimately going to election. The president is coming from the college, the presidential election college, electoral college, and these are elected from the people, ultimately from the people of the authority.
Yes, but here the brother Shahid is giving the impression that that the election of Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd is binding, even if the Ummah did not want that election.
No, he is faulty fundamentally. The Ahl al-Hal do not exist. Does not make any sense. It's a construct because the classical scholars faced the problem that all Khulafas and Muawiyah did not have a bay'ah. So they said, actually, the leaders of the army, the business people, the heavyweights of society approve them. And these are the ones who somehow bind and tie in behalf of the Ummah, somehow.
Yes. And here I wanna quote...
but it's fallacy. How do we know that somehow bind in behalf of the Ummah? Where do you find the word al-Aqd or anything similarly in Quran and Sunnah? Nowhere.
Professor, here I want to quote Ibn Taymiyyah when he said that Abu Bakr did not became a caliph by the election of Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd. He became a caliph the next day when the general public, they gave them the bay'ah.
So he means by the bay'ah in Saqeefah.
The bay'ah in Saqeefah.
Because the Saqeefah are not Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd, is a part of the Ummah.
Part of the Ummah, and the Ummah should give the general public should give the bay'ah for a caliph in order for him.
Yeah, but this is so obvious. This is so obvious. Otherwise, we'll stay a long time discussing Saqeefah. We should refer. I think Saqeefah is translated. If you have contact with this brother Shahid, Saqeefah is available in English. It can send to him. We can send.
In the comments.
So that's it. So we don't go into fine details now of bay'ah and so on, because it's a complex area. No doubt it's complex. But this construction of the classical scholars, especially Mawardi and Abu Dhar al Ghafari in Ahkam Sultan Al Ummah, Al-Hal wal-Aqd is an imaginary construction to get out of the dilemma. Because otherwise they say there is no bay'ah. So they have to construct an imaginary bay'ah. Like the people constructed something called the phoenix. Or in Arabic, al-Rukh wal-Anqa. Al-Anqa is the phoenix, a bird which blows fire. There's no bird like that. only in the imagination, in the metaverse, not in the real universe.
Or people watch South Park, Mando Pig. Shall we move to
all,
the next?
all imagination, imaginary construction. Imagine construction to save. So conclusion from that, which we have to face bitterly now, and Hizb ut-Tahrir has to review his own theory, is to go to say, from usurpation of the Munafiq Kafir Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, la'anahullah, until now, no ruler except few scattered here and there got a bay'ah. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz got a bay'ah after that when he cancelled the operation of Bani Umayyah. The people accepted him and they sent him letters, they sent him poetry, they sent delegation, which clearly expression all people, not the army, not Bani Umayyah, but Umayyah were plotting to kill him and they killed him and poisoned him. That's one. Al-Ma'mun may have something like that because his brother wanted to remove him from the allocation of his father, and then based on that he said, but then wide section of scholars and army supported him. I don't know if we can. We have to study that in detail because maybe he has some kind of popular supporter, but maybe not. We don't know. But later on, the scholars facing this problem when things become more systematic, like Al-Mawardi, when he wrote his magnum opus, Al-Ahkam al-Sultaniyah, he faced this dilemma. What's he supposed to do? Then he has to construct Bayah. That's it. Let me mention something on the Shia side. People think the Shia believe that is Nasr al-Ilahi, that the divine appointment to Imam. That was not the Ilya point of view. But and the Dawla al-Buwayhiyya, the Bani Buwayh, who controlled the Khilafah Abbasiyya in its mid-time until relatively late. Later on, the Turks, Al Basri came. They were Zaydi, and the Zaydi point of view is that the Imam should be in the Ahl al-Bayt. They have the first right, but with one condition: the Imam has to go out with the sword and claim his Imamah by force, which is a faulty point of view. But this point of view is a problem for the Bani Buwayh. They didn't go out to the sword; they were appointed by the Abbasi. So they adopted the man. I think is the Shaykh al-Mufid al-Nu'man. Anyway, and he fabricated this theory of Nasr al-Imama and the Imam like appointed. And in the time of Ghaiba, nobody can rebel and you have to obey. And this was very nice for a boy because they are Zaydi, they're supposed to go out with a sword. Now they can't sleep nicely because nobody can do politics or accept an imama until either someone calls from heaven or the one in the tunnel comes out. Well, then you can't sleep until all eternities. I'm just mentioning that casually. Maybe people interested should follow brother Ustad Ahmed al-Khatib about this, who develop all the story and give all the how much fabrication around the whole story happens. So that's the situation. That's the situation. That's all data fabrication. Never existed earlier. And some hadith were fabricated, especially in the Shia, some hadith fabricated, put back to the Messenger of Allah. They have even a story where it's not going to Jabir ibn Abdullah, that the Messenger of Allah said to him, do you know who will be Imam after me? It will be Ali, Al-Hassan, Hussein, Fulan, mentioning all by name until the last one. So mockery for same human beings, but that's what has happened, unfortunately. And millions of people were taken for a ride. But both the Sunni and the Shia come. Sunni by the Al-Halwa, the imaginary construction, which is less severe than that other one, but it's a severe because it justifies rulers who have no bay'ah.
Okay.
Now, if there's an illegitimate ruler who has no bay'ah, you have, if you have the power and you have sufficient power to remove them, then you are obliged, because you are not allowed, if you have power and you can, to leave them in power. But if you don't have, then you can't. But you are not obliged to obey. You can obey or disobey as you wish. You are not sinful for disobeying. But if you disobey, possibly they will punish you and prosecute you. If you are willing to take that, fine. So it's left to you for your own choice. That's how to deal with a kufr ruler or with a tyrannical ruler. That's another issue.
I mean, that's the crux of the point. If someone's going to advance a theory to say that you're obligated, then
no,
on one side say that, yeah, we should do this.
Definitely not, because the Nas of the Quran is absolute. وَلَا تُطِعْ مِنْهُمْ آثِمًا أَوْ كَفُورًا. Do not obey any athim, sinful or kafir from them. Someone say he's addressing al-mushrikeen. No, he's addressing everyone, the whole humanity, because al-mushrikeen, all of them kafir. That some of them are athim or not athim is irrelevant. Kufr is the major ithm. So this is, don't obey anyone who's athim or kafir. And the address to the messenger is addressed to everyone of the ummah unless there's a clear and irrefutable evidence that is specific for him. And it's not specific for him. So we are ordered not to obey any athim or any sinful, or the moment you know someone is sinful, you are not obliged to obey him. And you can't tell him in face, you are sinful, I can't obey you. Even if it's a private sin between him and Allah, you know about that. I'm not going to say that publicly, but you are a zani, I'm not going to obey you.
And even more than that, in the Haakimiyyah, for example, the issue about kufr,
we'll go in more fine details.
Destroyed completely, and we challenge any madkhali to bring it on.